Endorsement of Presley was because of his promise to work to expand Medicaid in Mississippi. Gray's withdrawal also comes less than 1 month before the November 7th general election. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
You'll see that top and diamond bar in the 57 north as you get up to the 60. A crash onto the right shoulder. You're on and off the brakes starting around D-Bar Boulevard. Pico Rivera Whittier, that 605 south at Washington. That's a crash onto the right side. Sticking up the drive from Rose Hills Road. Southgate on the 710 north at Imperial Highway. Crash from earlier onto the right shoulder. Kind of no go from Rosecrans. Boyle Heights on the 10 west. Approaching Soto Street. A wreck clear to the right side, but coming away from the 710 things are busy. Clear that stalled vehicle to Toluca Lake Studio City on the 134 west near the 101-170. That was in the carpool lane. That's gone. But still that busy drive as far back as Hollywood Way, Alameda.
Hey, if you're thinking of getting the latest iPhone, you need to stop and check out the wireless offer from Boost Infinite. For more, just pick up your phone and dial pound 250 and say Boost Infinite. That's pound 250 and Boost Infinite. You'll have the option to receive a one-time auto-dialed text message from this station's network.
Is this the time?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers are in trouble. They lose at home again to the Arizona Diamondbacks, this time by 2. The Dodgers are on the verge of elimination in the best-of-5 series. If the Diamondbacks win Game 3 Wednesday night in Phoenix, the Dodgers are done for the season. Some sad numbers affecting the Dodgers in the first 2 games. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, their top 2 hitters, are a combined 1 for 13 at the plate. The Dodgers are 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position and have stranded 13 base runners. The Lakers beat Brooklyn by 3 last night in a preseason game in Vegas. LeBron and Anthony Davis played the first half before getting the rest of the night off. LeBron had 10 points and 5 assists. The Clippers take on Utah tonight in Seattle. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
On October 12, 2022, Nuri Martinez resigned from the Los Angeles City Council. This came a few days after the world heard Nuri and other elected members of the council speak disparagingly about black people, indigenous people, and others.
This white guy with this little black kid bouncing off the effing walls on the floor. There's nothing you can do.
And what participants believed was a private conversation, racism, colorism, homophobia, and bigotry were exposed like never before. The effort to undermine the political influence of black fellow citizens was specifically targeted by these so-called leaders. Everyday people stormed the doors of City Hall demanding immediate resignations. Even the President of the United States called for resignations. On Thursday, October 12th, 5 to 7 p.m., KBLA Talk 1580 will host a day of dialogue on the anatomy of anti-black racism and bigotry in Los Angeles with an all-star panel of civic leaders. Don't miss this conversation. Thursday, October 12th, live from 5 to 7 p.m. with an encore performance from 7 to 9 p.m. only on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Trauma. Overseas, yeah, we trying to stop terrorism, but we still got terrorists here living in the USA, the big CIA, the Bloods and the Crips and the KKK. But if you only have love for your own race, then you only leave space to discriminate, and to discriminate only generates hate. And when you hate, then you're bound to get irate. Yeah, madness is what you demonstrate, and that's exactly how anger works and operates. Man, you gotta have love just to set it straight. Take control of your mind and meditate. Let your soul gravitate to the love, y'all.
People killing, people dying, children hurt and you hear them crying. When you practice what you preach and what you turn the other cheek. Father, 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 help us. Send some guidance from above. These people got me questioning. Where is the love?
I'm Tavis Smiley. I'm thrilled to have you tuned into our program in this hour. It's an amazing conversation with Lord Lewis. as I said a few times, there's so much in that book, so much to her love story with Reginald Lewis. I'm so glad that she took the time to just really share with us about his amazing backstory. And I repeat once again, if you have not read his book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? You got to read that, and then read her book, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? An Asian American story of love, marriage, motherhood, and running a billion-dollar empire. It's an amazing love story, but it's an amazing finance story. It's an amazing story of overcoming and resilience, and I just love the fact that Loretta Lewis was actually in LA today and was able to come join us in studio. And speaking of in studio, how lucky am I? This doesn't happen every day. When you do a show that's nationally syndicated like this, you end up talking to a lot of folk on the phone a lot of times. But I feel fortunate that 2 guests in a row are actually in studio, which is beautiful. So I don't feel so alone today. Usually it's just Miles and me. I never feel alone. Miles is always here with me. But I am delighted to have guests come in and see me from time to time. In this hour, new census data reveals that in the richest nation in the history of the world, the rise in poverty is stunning, and stunning is their word, not even mine. We'll talk about it in this hour with the director of the Blum Initiative on Global and Regional Poverty at UC Riverside here in California. His name is David Brady, and David Brady joins me right now in studio. David, good to see you. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me in studio as well.
It's my great delight to have you in studio. I should start by just bragging just a little bit. I noted in preparing for this conversation that you went to a place called Indiana University.
I did, yeah. I think we missed each other by a couple of years.
A few years. But I'm a proud Hoosier, and anytime I get a chance to shout out Indiana University, I'm going to do that. And so it turns out that my guest in this hour and I both matriculated at the same place in the Midwest. And so for all you Hoosier fans listening, there's another IU guy in the building right about now. That said, this is disturbing for me in a variety of ways, and disturbing is the kindest word I can use. In the course of my work and career, I've talked about poverty more times than I can count. At one point years ago, I did a documentary out of a tour that I did called The Poverty Tour. Did a poverty tour across the nation. Cornel West and I were on this bus together, going to big cities and small towns, Indian reservations, coal mines. We're all across the country on this poverty tour and filming what we saw. Out of that tour comes a book called The Rich and the Rest of Us, a Poverty Manifesto that I wrote along with Cornel West. And so this issue has been particularly important to me for many, many years. And so whenever I see new data about the crisis, the state of poverty in this country, other talk show hosts may think it's a boring subject, may not want to tackle it, but I'm drawn to it because too many of our fellow citizens find themselves in poverty. And as you well know, you can't just talk about poverty without talking about income inequality and economic immobility. And so I'm always delighted, as boring as it might be to some people, to have these conversations because I think it's unsustainable. This level of poverty, this gap between the rich and the rest of us, between the have-gots and the have-nots, is not sustainable. And I believe, and I want to start our conversation asking you this question, I believe that poverty is a threat to our very democracy. That's my view, that poverty is a threat to our democracy. That's a bold statement, but that's my view. What say you, David Brady?
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, if we know anything, we know that being poor discourages political participation. Mm-hmm. People are less likely to vote. They're less likely to have resources to have a voice in our democracy. So if it's not a threat to our democracy, it's certainly undermining our democracy. This huge chunk of people in America that we disempower and we basically disenfranchise by making them so economically insecure. They don't have the resources to have a voice in America. So I think that's definitely true. If it's not unsustainable, it's an extraordinary squandering of our resources. Mm-hmm. And so one way I think of poverty is to think of it as like, for example, our children are our natural resource. That's our best national resource. And we just squander these children, right? We have, huge shares of our child population that's in poverty, and they grow up to have all kinds of problems, from everything from health to other kinds of behavioral problems because of that poverty. And so we're just squandering national resources by letting so many children be deprived.
Let's talk about the squandering when we come forward with David Brady of UC Riverside. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive, unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac, perfection like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Coming 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Feel it, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac, Cadillac, Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com. Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with the CHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
If you're a veteran with a service-connected disability that is directly impacting your ability to work, resources are available to help you find employment. VA's Veteran Readiness and Employment, or VR&E, can assist you with finding a job that uses your existing skills. Or, if you're interested in exploring a new field, a VR&E counselor can help you determine the right education or training options for a new career. Find out if VR&E is right for you by visiting va.gov/VRE today.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of David Brady coming your way right now. According to the Census Bureau, the latest data shows, I mentioned moments ago in case you just tuned in, that there's a rise in poverty in this country, and that rise in poverty is stunning. Again, that's their word, not mine. David Brady is a professor of public policy and director of the Blum Initiative on Global and Regional Poverty at UC Riverside here in California, and I'm honored to have him in studio to talk about this new data and why some are stunned by the data. It is stunning, but we shouldn't be stunned by it. It's not like we didn't see this coming, particularly when we can't pass good public policy like the child tax credit and other things we let just go by the wayside. This shouldn't be stunning to any of us. But there are two S words that I want to, and one of them is not Smiley, but there are two S words that I want to give David Brady a chance to unpack. One mentioned on the air, the other mentioned during that break. But I want to give him a chance to unpack both of these. Let me start with the squandering word. So what you said earlier, David, is in this country we have a really bad problem of squandering resources. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, I mean, our child poverty rates are really high. Everybody knows that. They certainly were lower in 2021 because of the expanded child tax credit. Mm-hmm. So we proved in 2021 we can push child poverty, cut it in half. Mm-hmm. You know, we can push it down. But then we turned that off, partly because Senator Manchin and others were unwilling to continue the child tax credit, which worked extremely well. So right there in a 2-year period, you see us turn the switch on and off to get our child poverty rate half as big as what it is today. Mm-hmm. All right, but what's really troubling is we just maintain this disturbingly high rates of child poverty year after year after year, with the exception of 2021. And one way to think of it is that, like, you know, something like about a fifth of kids in America are poor. And we know that being poor is bad for your health. It's bad for your development. It's bad for your education. It's bad for your well-being. And so we're writing this check on children's backs, and then we're having to cash it later in life when these people have all kinds of problems. One concrete example is that in the 1980s, certain states expanded Medicaid to allow more kids to have access to Medicaid, which is a program to provide health care for poor kids. And we can see 30 years later, those kids that got Medicaid are less likely to have chronic conditions, right? Diabetes, Alzheimer's, arthritis, all kinds of chronic conditions. And chronic conditions are really expensive. So we're just squandering the health of these young people. And you fast forward to today, I mean, the numbers are pretty stunning. It's about a fifth of kids. But what we overlook is that it's about a third of African-American kids are poor. Almost a third of Native American and Latino American kids are poor. And by contrast, only about 10 or 11% of white and Asian kids are poor. So really, child poverty is a perfect way in which we create our racial inequality in America.
That's a damning indictment that we created.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that notion that we actually create this problem, particularly when it comes to black babies. But let me go back to Joe Manchin again. He has annoyed me, and not just me. He and Christian Sinema have annoyed me and others for months now. Fortunately, Democrats have a little breathing room, of course, in the Senate right now. But what does it say to you? What does it say to you, David? That let me rephrase it. I believe that you can judge any nation, any republic, by how it treats its children. That's my view. You can judge any nation by how it treats its children. I don't care what you say. I want to know what you are doing or not doing. Dr. King would put it this way, that budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents. Say what you will, but when I see your budget, I know what your priorities are, because budgets are moral documents. What's it say about our nation that you could have politicians in Washington? And let me just be more exact here. Joe Manchin represents West Virginia. I mentioned earlier on this poverty tour that I did years ago and did this documentary. I went to West Virginia. I went to those coal mines. And poverty in parts of West Virginia doesn't just exist. It's abject. It's abject poverty in West Virginia. How is it possible in this democracy, so-called democracy, you could have politicians who do away with, think it is not worth extending a child tax credit?
Yeah, I mean, we can get in his head, but I think it's just a commitment to just a totally wrong-headed way to think about the issue. You know, if you're obsessed with disciplining and punishing poor people to teach them some sort of lesson, you can withhold anything from them. Why don't we let them starve to death? Maybe they'll learn the lesson then. And I think he's just completely consumed by this teaching and disciplining and punishing poor people because he doesn't think they're working hard enough, or they're not living their lives the way they want. So part of it is just this completely wrong-headed way to view it, Liz. A second way to think of it is just greed and self-interest. He's a very wealthy guy. He probably has a very, very high income himself. And the way you fight poverty is you tax rich people to pay it to help poor people. That's how you do it. There's no other way to do it. It's not rocket science. No country in the history of the world has had low poverty without some redistribution. So if you don't want to pay taxes because you're a rich person like Joe Manchin, who's a multimillionaire, then you're never going to be able to do anything about poverty. So he's both got this sort of wrong-headed, old-fashioned, punitive view of poor people, and he's just unwilling to pay taxes for him and his affluent friends.
Racism may be, as I've said more than once, may be the most intractable issue in this country. And yet, that is a distinctly different statement from the statement that you made, which is that we end up perpetuating racism by the way in which we deny black babies. Say a word about that.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I agree with both your premise that racism is probably the most intractable inequalities in American society. And I do think we create it. We actively maintain it, right? We sometimes like to believe that if we could just be compassionate to people, somehow this would overcome this. But let's be real. It's in the self-interest of white people like myself to maintain this racial hierarchy that we have in society. People take advantage of the fact that they have all these advantages because of race. So So, I mean, I think we need to be honest that people benefit from racism, and they benefit from a system that subjugates all these people. And it shouldn't be surprising to us that people are working hard to maintain that system. It's in their self-interest. And I think we make very deliberate political choices in America to withhold resources and to maintain the system we've got.
The thought that comes to me, though, as you're talking about being a white guy, is that so many children today in poverty are white.
Yeah.
So it is true that we are creating this problem. We are perpetuating racism with the ways in which we deny black babies. But it is also true. Two things can be true at the same time. Obviously, it's also true that a whole lot of these babies, a whole lot of these folks who are poor, are white.
Yeah.
And that still seems not to be the engine that can help us get some traction on this issue, even though there are more white kids who are impoverished now than ever before. It reminds me of the whole gun debate. Mm-hmm. I've said many times that when I saw those white kids get killed at Sandy Hook and nothing was done about that, I said then, America ain't serious about this issue. We will never get serious about guns. It's one thing to let black and brown babies get killed by gun violence, but when they see their own babies get killed, and this issue doesn't get taken seriously, America ain't never going to get serious about gun violence. Yeah. They can let white babies get slaughtered in situations like these. So I come back to this issue of poverty. If we know that the numbers of white babies and white people in this country are rising as well, again, the government's word is stunning. Mm-hmm. They are stunned by this rise in poverty. Well, that ain't just black people. That ain't just brown people. And yet that isn't enough to get a real conversation about poverty, income inequality, and economic immobility, which leads me to ask, if not that, then what? When will we ever get serious about it?
Yeah, I mean, I have this line where to understand poverty, we have to both think about who's more likely to be poor. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it would be African-American people, but also who are most of the people in poverty. And we need to understand both of those dynamics. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about like who a typical poor person in America is, it's a white middle-aged lady with a high school degree that has a partner and a job in the South. Mm-hmm. That's who the typical poor person is. But we don't think about it that way. And so it's very important we're morally outraged by the racial disparities in poverty, but we also need to think about sort of who are most people in poverty. Most people in poverty are workers. They're people that are working outside the home. So I think both of those are important. Now, but it's a tough question. Like, if we know how to fix poverty, why don't we do it? Gosh, I wish I had a great answer. I mean, I guess American ideology, we believe in individuals. We want to make people work. We believe that individual behavior can drive the problem, even though it doesn't. And, you know, it's so short-sighted, like we talked about with squandering, because it just doesn't even make sense financially to deprive poor kids of resources and then be surprised later in life you're paying for it.
I mentioned earlier that I want to get to two S words. I haven't got to the second. I didn't forget, y'all. Yeah. Squandering was the first S word. I'm coming to the second S word in a moment, but David keeps saying things that keep taking me in different directions, and I can't get to the second S word, but I will, I promise. You said something a moment ago. Again, I want to interrogate right now and give you a chance to expound upon, and that is the reality that most people in this country who are in poverty also work.
Yeah.
That if that ain't a damning indictment of our culture, of our society, I don't know what is. That most people who are in poverty actually work. They're not lazy. They're not shiftless. They haven't given up on themselves or on the American dream, whatever that is these days. But how do I process that statement that most fellow citizens in this country who are in poverty also go to work every day?
Yeah. So the number I like to use is that about 3 times as many people are in households of, 3 times as many poor people are in households where somebody is working versus no one is working. And I think that's a clean way to think about it. If you've got a breadwinner in the household that's working, you're still poor. That's a working poor person. The whole household is a working poor household. Sure, there's a population that's much older or very young. Of course, they're not working. But amongst anyone that could be working, most poor people are working. And we have to think of American poverty as really a problem of working poverty. There's far more people working than there's not working. And also, I mean, Americans are crazy workaholics. Look at us. We work all the time. We work more than other countries. We have low rates of unemployment compared to other countries. So it's just not true that the problem is joblessness or people not working. Most poor people work.
But if you work, why should you be poor?
I guess because we have why are we or why should we? We shouldn't be,
right?
But we are because we have incredibly weak labor unions in the United States. We are because we don't have the supplements to people's incomes. We don't do enough of that. So we do things like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, but that's not enough. We need to do more to facilitate sort of taking people's earnings further so they can make it. Okay.
Speaking of labor unions, I initially, as this audience knows, I was calling it a summer of strikes. Summer is now over. We're in the fall. So now I call it a season of strikes.
I like it.
Yeah, we're in a season of strikes now. As one who works on the issue of poverty, given that you mentioned labor unions, how do you read the fact that these workers who are also poor are raising up their backs and taking to the picket line?
Yeah, it's good news to see some resistance, and it's good to see labor empowered. It happens when the economy is a bit better. That's when labor feels they have the capacity to speak out and to rise up and push back against a system that's pretty rigged against them. I think what's unique about right now is that, as is the case, a lot of these strikes are defensive. The United Auto Workers is striking to protect what they used to have, to try to get their wages to where they used to be, to try to protect their jobs. And so that's the sad reality, is that a lot of strikes are often defensive, but it's a good thing. I'm glad to see labor rise up. I'm glad to see a little bit of energy around labor. We've still got a long ways to go, and we still have a low level of unionization compared to most other rich democracies. Even within the U.S., think about some of the places in the U.S., California, New York, you're upwards of 25% of people are unionized, of workers are unionized. But you got places like North Carolina where it's like, 1% of the private sector is unionized, 3% of total workers. And so the disparities across the United States are very telling as well. In the South, it's almost illegal to be a member of a labor union, right? And in places like California and New York, the average worker is going to fare better than they will in Mississippi and Alabama, partly because of labor.
Yeah. So the first S word I wanted you to unpack was squandering. We did that. The second S word is scarcity. And as I understand your point of view and read your work, you have an indictment of this notion of scarcity that we try to claim at times in this country.
Yeah, we like to tell ourselves this story that, there's not enough to go around. Oh, we don't have any money in the budget. The government doesn't have enough resources. We make political choices. We have plenty of resources. We live in one of the most opulent, affluent countries in the history of the world. Here in Los Angeles, we've got tons of economic resources. We're an incredibly rich city, yet we have, tens of thousands of people living on the street here in Los Angeles because we choose to withhold those resources for those people. So, most of what we think of as a quote-unquote scarcity is really just a distribution problem. One way to think of it metaphorically is Mark Rank is a famous poverty scholar I really like, and he describes poverty as like a game of musical chairs. It's like we take away one of the chairs, and then we say, oh, the problem is you're too slow grabbing a chair. And it's like the game is rigged. There's not enough chairs. I think of it not just as a shortage of chairs, but that we make a political choice to let some guys lay across 3 chairs. We have 2 or 3 chairs that are piled in the corner, disrepaired nearby, and we could fix those chairs. We could make this guy have only 1 chair, and we choose to create this artificial scarcity by how we distribute resources, right? And so there's plenty of resources. You and I and many people here in California are very affluent. We're very fortunate. We don't have a shortage of resources, but we choose to not distribute them.
When we come forward, I want a couple other questions I want to ask about this distribution problem. So it's not a scarcity problem; it's a distribution problem. And that dialogue we just had begs the obvious question, which is what is to be done about this distribution problem. So think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Now that you need to, you do this every day, running the Blum Initiative on global and regional poverty at UC Riverside. So he doesn't need time to think about it. He just needs time to explain it. I don't have that time right now, but I will when we come forward. You're listening to David Brady on Tavis Smiley.
Great.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found BenefitsCheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. BenefitsCheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Families of Americans missing in Israel are asking the U.S. government to act. Speaking in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, families described the last messages received from loved ones after the Palestinian militant group Hamas attacked Israel over the weekend. One mother said she knew the last message she got from her son saying, "I'm sorry," meant something had happened that would cause her worry. In Mississippi, independent candidate Gwendolyn Gray announced on Monday that she's withdrawing from the governor's race and throwing her support behind Democrat Brandon Presley. In a written statement, Gray, who is African-American, said her endorsement of Presley was because of his promise to work to expand Medicaid in Mississippi. Gray's withdrawal also comes less than 1 month before the November 7th general election. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Need an accident attorney by your side? All you got to do is call the Accident Guys.
Injured in a car accident or at work? The Accident Guys can come to you almost anywhere, so you don't have to come to us. Se habla español.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers are in trouble. They lose at home again to the Arizona Diamondbacks, this time by 2. The Dodgers are on the verge of elimination in the best-of-5 series. If the Diamondbacks win Game 3 Wednesday night in Phoenix, the Dodgers are done for the season. Some sad numbers affecting the Dodgers in the first 2 games. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, their top 2 hitters, are a combined 1 for 13 at the plate. The Dodgers are 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position and have stranded 13 base runners. The Lakers beat Brooklyn by 3 last night in a preseason game in Vegas. LeBron and Anthony Davis played the first half before getting the rest of the night off. LeBron had 10 points and 5 assists. The Clippers take on Utah tonight in Seattle. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
We're celebrating 1 year of the K. From checking out the vibrant art and diverse dining in Leimert Park to cheering on your favorite team in Inglewood, you can choose your own adventure when you ride the Metro K-Line. Leave the car at home and go Metro. Visit metro.net/K-Line.
Hey, son. How are you feeling?
I'm fine, Pops.
What's on your mind?
I can't explain it. Navigating without a compass, eyes waiting, started to wonder. Metamorphosis, the loss of who you thought you was.
When your kid can't find the language, help them find the lyrics. Listen to the Sound It Out album and get tips and tools to start a conversation at sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by Ad Council and Pivotal Ventures.
Turning my pain into purpose is pretty much what I have done to start this foundation.
In August 2020, after the death of George Floyd, Bridget Floyd and other family members established the George Floyd Memorial Foundation in support of the Black community.
It's going to take more than just us as a foundation. It's going to take the community, the world, to make a change.
Fight for racial justice for the Black community. Learn how at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
1 in 4 Americans today are living with a disability. I'm one of them. People with disabilities are extremely talented, resilient problem solvers that have so much to offer. And we've got a trusted ally on our side, an organization we can rely on, Easter Seals. Easter Seals is leading the way to full equity, inclusion, and access to healthcare, employment, and education for people with disabilities, families, and communities. That's my Easter Seals. Make it yours.
Learn more and get involved at easterseals.com.
Anyone can choose to make a difference. You can help people succeed, rebuild after disasters, protect the environment, or feed the hungry. Not only will you make a difference for others, but for yourself. You can earn money for college, learn career skills, and make friendships that last a lifetime. Make a difference. Choose your future. Choose AmeriCorps.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed, with David Brady, who is a professor of public policy and director of the Blum Initiative on Global and Regional Poverty at UC Riverside here in California. In case you've just tuned in, we've been having a spirited conversation already. What we are talking about in this hour is new census data that points out that there's a stark and sharp, trying to say two words at once, a stark and sharp rise in poverty in this country that the government at least finds to be stunning. Why they are stunned when they keep this data, and why they are stunned when they pass bad public policy, why they are stunned when they don't take this issue seriously is stunning to me. But nonetheless, they say they are stunned by this dramatic rise in poverty. We're trying to unpack that with an expert in this field, David Brady. There are a few things watching my time with that I want to just kind of move through. The first is this distribution issue that you were raising earlier. So we were talking about scarcity, and your point was scarcity is really an excuse. It's trash. There really is no scarcity in this country, the richest nation in the history of the world, with opulence and affluence everywhere you look. Your thing was there's a distribution problem. So give me just a bit more on this distribution problem, what it is and what ought be done about the distribution problem.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about the child tax credit, which is such a beautiful example where we turned on a policy that cuts child poverty in half for 1 year, and then we turned it off. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the estimates of how much that cost, a little fuzzy, but $200 billion, more or less. And coming up with $200 billion may sound like a lot of money, but it's not. We've got those resources. We could generate that tax revenue. We could reappropriate other funds.
We're giving Ukraine money by the billions.
By the billions,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And we give money away in terms of not having a legitimate estate tax for inheritance. We don't have high enough tax on affluent people. There's tons of tax evasion by rich people where they shelter their money elsewhere and so forth. So we could raise $200 billion. We just choose not to, right? And we turn that off, right? And what's even more sort of mind-blowing about it is that not only do we have those $200 billion available to pay for the child tax credit if we chose to do so, but we also pay for not funding that child tax credit. So down the line, that's going to cost more money in health care than it would if we invested in those kids. So it's just not, it's even counterproductive to do so.
There are two things in particular that you have been working on that I want to get some data out of you, if I can. Let me do it in this order. First, little birdie told me that the Blum Initiative has been doing some interviews with politicians in various parts of the country, and that you're essentially talking to them, and this is my word, sort of quizzing them on what they know about poverty. Now, as a guy who does television and radio, I would love to be a fly on the wall or be in the corner with my hidden camera to record what it is that you're actually hearing and seeing when you're talking to politicians and asking them questions about poverty. So when you quiz these politicians about poverty, what's your takeaway about what they know and don't know about the crisis of poverty in this country? How ignorant are they about poverty?
Yeah, I mean, so we gave them like 12 different questions, and we had 38 California state legislators and 10 Texan state legislators as a comparison, and they get about half the questions right out of those 12 questions. And the things they get wrong are telling. Like, they really have no understanding of where the top of the income distribution is. So like think about what does it take to be in the top 5% of the income distribution? It takes like what, maybe $400,000 or $500,000, something like that. And they think it takes billions, millions. And so when they raise taxes on quote unquote rich people, they don't think they think they need to only target super rich people, and they don't appreciate people like themselves that have $300,000-$400,000. Those are the rich people that you need to be taxing as well. So they just have a very vague sense of the income distribution. They don't know where the bottom 20% is. So they think that surely the official poverty line, for example, is much higher than it actually is. So when we say 10-12% of Americans are poor with the really conservative official poverty measure, they think, oh, that means they have $40,000. And it's like, no, that means they have less than $20,000 for a family of 3 or something. So they just don't really understand where the income distribution is. They get some things right. Like they know, we ask them if the home mortgage interest tax deduction is bigger than temporary assistance to needy families, and they know that, okay, but they don't know a lot of different things about like really what the realities of poverty are. So we ask them about if most poor people are in working poor households or non-working poor households. A lot of them get that wrong. They don't really understand that. And so this Tavis and I were talking about, do they really understand what average Americans have to deal with to make ends meet? And I think you were saying you suspect they do not.
No, I think they don't. In part because when you think about the U.S. Senate, for example, it's a millionaire and billionaire class who run the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned Joe Manchin earlier. I could pick a number of them out. But if I were to ask members right now, United States Senate, what's the price of eggs? They would be clueless.
Wow.
If I were to ask them what the price of gas is, they know gas prices are soaring, but they don't put gas in their cars. Many of them would fail a fundamental question right now. What is the price of gas?
Yeah.
They wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
And so there are these basic questions, to your point about asking them about poverty. There are basic questions they don't know because they are so far removed from it. But when you are, again, part of the millionaire class and billionaire class who run the U.S. Senate, your life is so removed from the lives, as Sly Stone would say, of everyday people that you don't know what they're trying to navigate. And then here you come with more data telling me that you guys actually sat down and asked them questions about poverty and they didn't get it, which leads me to ask you, how can we ever expect the body politic to get this issue right, much less take it seriously, if they don't even know where the lines are when it comes to poverty? David Brady?
That's a really hard question. I mean, can I answer a different question because yours
certainly
is too
may.
hard? But I mean, one exercise I've done with my students for years, is I take out the official poverty line. I say, how much money does it cost to be not poor? And I say, okay, now class, make ends meet. Where do you spend that money? This is how much you have every month for a family of 3 or a family of 4. How do you make ends meet? How much does rent cost? How much does child care cost? Health insurance cost? And I show again and again and again, no one can make ends meet on that line. You just can't make it. And so even these poverty numbers that you and I are throwing around, they're dramatic underestimates. There's millions more poor people that cannot make ends meet even at that line. And I don't know. I mean, how do we penetrate the policymakers' understanding of just families making ends meet? I don't know how we get there, but I agree with you. They don't know. They don't know.
They don't get it. They're in the dark, and that's tragic. It's tragic. The other thing I know that you've been working on at the Blum Initiative is some mortality data. And speaking of what they don't get, if they don't know the price of eggs or the price of gas or the price of milk or whatever, they don't know those things because they're so far removed from it. They don't shop for themselves. They don't put gas in their cars. They don't live the lives that we live. They've got great health insurance. I mean, so many Americans still don't. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're approaching the 10th anniversary of Obamacare. I want to get your take on that and its connection link to poverty in this country. But I know you've been working on some mortality data. And if they don't get the other stuff, these senators and congresspersons, then they really don't get that poverty for so many fellow citizens really is a life or death issue. The only time these policymakers understand a life or death issue is literally if they or someone they know has cancer or something. But they don't understand that for many fellow citizens, poverty is a life or death question.
Yeah. So we did this study that was published this past summer on this issue, and we came up with a number. We said about 183,000 deaths in 2019, before the pandemic. 183,000 deaths can be attributed to poverty. Okay. And that is a gigantic number. That's comparable to the amount of death from dementia or from accidents. It's almost as many as killed by stroke. And it's certainly as many people as die from obesity. So it's a huge risk factor for death in America. And just to give you like the basic logic of how we do this, imagine you're following like 20,000 people over time. And they're being poor or not is like a switch you're turning on and off. And then we say, okay, in the next year, did that person die? So we can calculate the probabilities. If we made you poor or not in a given year, how much does your probability of dying increase? And so we say it increases by a factor of like 1.4. You do the math, you work it all out, end up with about 183,000 deaths. So we have 10 times as many people dying from poverty as we do from homicide. And I wouldn't want to trivialize homicide.
No,
that's very, very sad. And of course, we should be concerned about homicide as well. But we're just letting hundreds of thousands of people die from poverty every year while we get freaked out about these other causes of death.
Well, the point is that it's predictable.
It's totally predictable.
You can actually, as you just did, you can do the math. And if you make somebody so poor over a period of time, ding, 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 they're going to die.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. I digress. We'll continue with David Brady when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
The City of Los Angeles Civil Rights Department and its Reparations Advisory Commission are calling on you to be a part of something powerful. Join the Black Experience Study to share your experiences with the City of Los Angeles. We want to hear your stories. To join the study, join a focus group, or schedule an interview with us, visit www.blackexperiencela.com by December 31st. For more information, call 213-978-1845 or visit www.laisforeveryone.com.
At Susan G. Komen, we believe that ending breast cancer needs all of us working together. Because if you've just been diagnosed and don't know where to turn, we've got you. If you can't afford the treatment you need, we've got you. And if you are driven to honor the loved one you've just lost, we have a place for you here. Because of you, we're supporting those who need help today while tirelessly searching for tomorrow's cures. Visit Komen.org and be a part of our Susan G. Komen community today.
Do you have both Medi-Cal and Medicare?
If so, the new LA Care plan called Medicare Plus can help you get the most out of your health plan for $0.
LA Care provides personalized service to Angelinos like us.
Plus, it gives us access to doctors and specialists across Los Angeles County.
For zero cost, we get access to full benefits.
From vision coverage,
in-home support services,
to prescription drug coverage,
and a quarterly over-the-counter allowance,
plus personal equipment,
meal programs,
a gym membership,
and so much more.
For more than 25 years,
LA Care has provided Angelinos with access to quality health care at an affordable cost.
For our families,
our seniors,
our community,
it's a plus.
It's a plus
for all of us.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
I mentioned David Brady moments ago that we are approaching now, believe it or not, the 10th anniversary of Obamacare. And I laugh every time I say that because it's actually called the Affordable Health Care Act, right?
Yeah.
And nobody knows what it's actually called because Republicans started calling it Obamacare as a way to denigrate it. And then that name stuck. And as years go by and the former president looks back on what he was, in fact, able to accomplish, it turns out that Obamacare is the greatest thing he actually got done.
Yeah.
For many of us, it wasn't what we thought, what we hoped. In many ways, I think Obama negotiated against himself and sort of watered down what he promised when he ran, which is universal health care. Obamacare is not universal health care. Mm-hmm. It's approaching universal health care. It's a step in the right direction. That's not what it is. That's what he promised, and I think he negotiated against himself in some ways. That said, it is the crown jewel of the Obama era, the Obamacare. So what they meant as a way to demean him, what they meant as a way to denounce him, it has stuck, and it really is called Obamacare, and he can proudly say, yeah, I'm the guy that did that. It's Obamacare. But we're approaching the 10th anniversary, and I'm wondering if you can draw any sort of linkages, any parallels between Obamacare and poverty, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say one thing is that I think it's actually a healthy and productive friction that people like you, Tavis, are pushing President Obama to do more. And I think all of the progressive victories towards equality happen because of that productive friction. You have moderates that are being more cautious, and you have those of us that are pushing harder. And I'm an incrementalist. I'll take the win and say we made some progress, but we only get there because people are pushing him to go further. So I think it's a productive friction, and it's important that people keep the pressure on the Democrats to push even further. But I do think we have to give him credit in that he lifted tens of millions out of uninsurance.
No doubt.
And that's like giving them money, right? You know, in some ways, if you don't have to buy health insurance and now you qualify for Medicaid, it's like you're getting several $400 a month per person because if you had to buy it.
And as you know, healthcare concerns bankrupt more Americans than anything else.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons, I have this pet theory that one of the reasons we're so worried about housing these days is because we actually made some progress on healthcare over the past 10 years. And so by no means are we all the way there. But my view of it is like you keep pushing, you take the wins, the moderates, maybe they compromise in ways I might not do, but we get towards a better situation by pushing. And you look at most of the rich democracies, they didn't get equality by like one piece of legislation. It was always a push and struggle over several decades. So Obamacare really reset the agenda. And now we're debating Medicare for all because they set the agenda where that actually got on the discussion table. But we have to give them credit. I mean, tens of millions of people got health insurance that wouldn't have had it. And that's like giving them a lot of money.
When we come forward in our remaining moments with David Brady, I want to ask a question he just teased up for me now, and that is, we were talking earlier about the ways he can predict, the way they do this mortality data. If you're poor for a certain period of time, there are certain conditions that you live in, the data is clear. You're going to die. And so they can actually tell who's going to die, and it's just a sad reality in this country that we can predict who's going to die directly because of poverty. So to your point now about houselessness and homelessness, I wonder what we are wrestling with right now that we can be predictive about in the future when it comes to poverty based on the houselessness and homelessness of fellow citizens. We'll do that when we come forward in our remaining moments with David Brady on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when they switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
What's up? I'm Danelle Riley, FAMU alumni and creator of the HBCU Culture Shop. I am so proud of my new partnership with Black Beyond Measure and Target. They help me elevate community pride with my HBCU designs and continue to support Black creators and entrepreneurs with Target HBCU challenges, scholarship programs, and campus collaborations. Let's come together this homecoming season and beyond. Shop my brand and discover other Black-owned products at target.com/BlackBeyondMeasure.
I'm getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20.
So am I, because I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
If you're 19 or older with chronic conditions like asthma, diabetes, COPD, or heart disease, or are 65 or older, you are at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine. It can help protect you against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Even if you've already been vaccinated with other pneumonia vaccines, Prevnar 20 may help provide added protection. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. Side effects include pain and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle, and joint pain. For full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the Evan-On, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
I'm Tavis Smiley. He's David Brady. He is the director of the Blum Initiative on Global and Regional Poverty at UC Riverside here in California. He's also a professor of public policy at UC Riverside. And I'm delighted, although the subject matter is something I wish we didn't have to discuss. As I said to you in the break, this is a will problem, not a skill problem. This is a will problem, not a skill problem. We have the skill. We don't have the will to address this issue. In the remaining moments that we have, though, I said I wanted to ask you about, since there are other things you can predict, namely the mortality rate of people who are going to die, literally from just being poor. That ought to be unacceptable in this country, that you could die just from being poor. But that said, there's a rise not just in this city, but you got Karen Bass fighting this in L.A. I talked to the mayor last night. You have Eric Adams in New York begging migrants to stop coming to New York City because it's increasing their issue of homelessness, houselessness, and ability to put these people in safe spaces. All across the country, you have mayors wrestling. I talked to Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, was on this program just last week. He's wrestled with this in Chicago. So it's an everywhere problem. The question right quick is, what do you see into the future regarding poverty? If we think that the government thinks that this new data says that there's a rise in poverty, and they find it stunning that we are experiencing a rise right now. As we continue to wrestle, or not wrestle, as it were, successfully with houselessness and homelessness, what impact will that have on poverty rates continuing to rise? And if stunned is the word for the day now, I don't know what the word will be a year or two from now.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of think of homelessness as like the combination of poverty and other social problems with a really bad housing market. So like that combo gets you homelessness. I saw an article in the New York Times the other day that West Virginia has more drug addiction, more poverty than California, but doesn't have the homelessness we have here because they have a more they have a stock of housing for low-income folks. So I think of homelessness as just kind of like the tip of the spear of that combination. I give Mayor Bass a lot of credit. I think she's rolled up her sleeves from day one. She's treated it as the emergency it actually is. She's put enormous resources in trying to make a situation better. The prior administrations just acted as if the problem wasn't there. They just didn't really do anything about it. They built long-range housing as opposed to treating it as an emergency. Building long-range housing is a good thing, but that didn't address the sort of urgent nature of it. So I give her a lot of credit as trying to clean up a terrible situation. If we wanted a mayor that just acted as if the terrible situation wasn't there, she wasn't the woman to do that. And that's why I respect her, is that she's admitted we have a crisis. One number I heard, and I think this is true, although it's hard to pin down, is that something like 2 or 3 times as many people die homeless in LA as from homicide. And think about how much money we spend on the police budget here in Los Angeles. It's like a fifth or a quarter of our budget. And whether it should be or shouldn't be, set that aside for a second and say, we're letting 3 times as many people die homeless as we are for just, a few hundred homicides. And so it really says something about, like you said, Martin Luther King, that our budget's a moral document. We've chosen to put more money into police and not enough money into housing, and this is the situation we've created.
Well, what Karen Bass is dealing with here in L.A., Brandon Johnson is dealing with in Chicago, Eric Adams in Chicago, they're dealing with it in New Orleans, all across the country. This issue is being dealt with. Sheila Jackson Lee wants to be mayor in Houston. She gonna deal with it in Houston.
Yeah.
It's a conundrum, and we'll leave it there for now. David Brady is professor of public policy and director of the Blum Initiative on Global and Regional Poverty at UC Riverside. I've been honored to have you in the studio, David. Thanks for your insight and for your work and your witness. I appreciate you. That's our program. Back tomorrow. Do it all over again, Lord willing. Until then, thanks for tuning in, and as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Families of Americans missing in Israel are asking the U.S. government to act. Speaking in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, families described the last messages received from loved ones after the Palestinian militant group Hamas attacked Israel over the weekend. One mother said she knew the last message she got from her son saying, "I'm sorry," meant something had happened that would cause her worry. In Mississippi, independent candidate Gwendolyn Gray announced on Monday that she's withdrawing from the governor's race and throwing her support behind Democrat Brandon Presley. In a written statement, Gray, who is African American, said her endorsement of Presley was because of his promise to work to expand Medicaid in Mississippi. Gray's withdrawal also comes less than 1 month before the November 7th general election. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.